promote panelists, promote panelists.
Cool.
And I'm going to go back, then I'll make you co-host again. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And I can look at this way. I can also continue to look and promote people. So take it away.
Cool. So before we start, do we have a specific in the issue? Did we create a Google Doc to keep track of everything?
I don't think we did that. So somebody,
No,
if you want
I
to
will
create
just
one.
create one. Yeah, I will create one and share it with everyone here.
Yeah, that'd be great. I was thinking like after we go over the survey results, we might want to like whip up like a Miro board or something like interactive, like a whiteboard where people can jam potentially, but we can talk about that later. Hi, Paula and Claudio. Oh,
So you should all be able to access this link.
Yep.
Cool. Hello, everyone. So I think we are live now. Thank you, Michael, for that. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the Next 10 deep dive in the last day of February, so the 29th, 2024, which is amazing. We won't have that before the next 4 years. And today we are here to discuss to do a deep dive about the project advocacy and promotion. We did run a survey in the last couple days-ish, and the survey will run a bit more. I think, yeah. Okay, so yeah. The link of the survey are being shared internally, and yes, feel free to add yourself. I was going to add that for the people that are here. Great, so we have a couple hours to discuss about 1 hour, 2 hours, the next 2 hours to discuss about how can we improve and what the current state of people that want to contribute to Node.js on a more like advocacy role, advocacy position, and what's maybe missing on Node.js around that. Hi, Wes. And so the main idea would be to exchange, like we have multiple people that are sharing content, creating content, part of Node.js, part of other community around Node.js from framework and everything. So, and it was something that was raised also during the previous Next 10 survey that advocacy can be hard, or finding good content or content up to date is not something that is easy for everyone. So we are here to discuss how can we improve that. Great. And I was going to give you the mic, Amal, but I'm seeing you drinking.
I'm good. I just
Okay.
drinking. Yeah. Cool. I'm happy to take over. Thank you so much for the intro, Jean, and thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much and for your time here today, and I know many of you contributed to the survey as well. So just wanted to say thank you all so much for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. We have, as of right now, I think we had as of an hour and a half ago, we had 20 responses, and there's a few more coming in. So we had, I'll share my screen and we can talk through. All right, just let me know when you can see like an opening slide. Hopefully.
Oh, good.
Okay, great. What we did was reach out privately to Node.js community advocates and experts, different leaders, and to kind of get some data points for this session today. And so this was kind of a very targeted survey for folks that are just kind of visibly doing work in and around Node, various kind of community members from around the world. I made a public call out, and it was also great to connect with people that were completely outside of my own network as well. And some of those folks are here today, so hello. And so we had this survey running for a few days, and it's been like an incredible response rate. We've had a few people who, responded back to me saying, I don't know, I don't really see myself fully in this role. So if we exclude those folks, it's been like over 70, it's like almost 70% response rate so far, especially that given people who've already told me that they will fill it out in a few days because they didn't have time. So just really thankful to everyone who was able to. Sorry, I don't know what happened. Hmm, oh, sorry, I think this needs to like move to the end. My bad. All right, so so the survey questions were pretty targeted as well. Like we had like a big list, and thanks to Wes and Marco and Jean and Michael last week, we kind of narrowed it down to just these 3 questions that we felt like really got to the meat of the problems that we were trying to understand. So it was like, what resources or support do you need, that would better help you kind of do advocacy work? What are some of the most misunderstood and confusing concepts for Node.js users, like as folks are interacting with people in the wild? And what challenges do folks face in their role kind of when they're trying to do advocacy work? So for the first question, this was with the help of ChatGPT, was able to get this summarized. So yay for AI. People were very, like I think I shared link. So for those of you who can see the raw survey, obviously there was, some people wrote paragraphs of stuff. So essentially the kind of main themes here were, one was negativity, dealing with negativity and online trolls, right? Specifically around like, what do you need? Some sponsorship, monetary support from employers, not having enough time to be like work on this stuff was kind of a huge like recurring theme for folks. Missing out on kind of CFPs and not being clear about when conference deadlines are like happening and what conferences are happening where, right? So essentially like there was this theme of like, there isn't enough clear information about all the stuff that's happening. There's no like one place for me to go. Like there was a need to kind of have a place to gather and communicate online. Just clearness about the direction of Node and just not having a clear understanding of like, what are official communication channels, where am I, where do I go for official comms on stuff? And also there was kind of complaints from folks around like not having enough like official communications as well. There was there's not a ton of clarity for some folks around the direction and the future of Node. And just they'd like increased access to conferences and networking opportunities. There's some kind of complaints around the messaging from the core team, which can sometimes be conflicting because, there's essentially people who are publicly visible but don't agree on stuff. And that's, it can make it challenging to give guidance to the community around like a particular issue. So having problems with like Node.js's like ability to identify and kind of target users and how to like set best practices, increasing kind of having more of like a formal space within OpenJS for kind of sharing work and like having a forum for knowledge sharing and like learning, essentially something like within the foundation that kind of houses space for that. And then like better support and integration with like Node.js Weekly, and kind of improving the website and all of that other stuff. So I'll just any questions or thoughts so far?
I think Michael got his end
Oh
right.
yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, the last one I thought was interesting because that seems to imply that people think the project runs Node weekly, which is not the case. So I just thought interesting to mention that, but that's it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's the other distinction. Like that was another thing that came up. You'll see that later. People were like, there's just confusion in general around the governance and ownership of certain certain parts of the Node project. Wes?
I think there's a lot of really valuable stuff in here, just to be clear. I think this is awesome. So I think one of the most interesting ones to me is this consistent messaging from Node core team. This is a gross misunderstanding of the way the project is run, right? Like the whole point is to have a bunch of people who disagree in the same room trying to like figure out what the best way forward is. That's actually a good thing, a healthy thing. Now, calling it infighting is probably accurate, but problematic. And I think, you know, finding the line between infighting and like healthy discussion is probably difficult when you don't know the personalities involved. So I think that's really interesting, and I think we should probably figure out what is the important thing to take away from that. So there has been discussions in the past about like, well, you don't want certain personalities to get that TSC label because they tend to stir the boat, and that might look like it's the project speaking for it, but it is the project speaking for it. And just because they're not on the TSC doesn't mean that it doesn't come across that way, right? Like, for example, me, who has no official role in the project, like I'm not even a collaborator. I've gotten people saying to me, oh, wait, I thought you were a collaborator. So, and then when I express an opinion, they're like, oh, I thought you were speaking as somebody who like works unknown. I'm like, I have no official role. So I don't think there's like a clear, when we use the argument that having the TSC role gives some weight to the like people saying something, and then people think that my opinion has any weight, like clearly there's like a really pretty big gap between the understanding of the external folks and the way that the project is actually being run. So like I think there's maybe some way, like there's got to be some way to help close that gap. And that might help clear up some of these other things that are, you know, about what's happening in the project and all that. So anyway, I think that's just a really interesting one that might be worth digging into.
Yeah, I'm nodding furiously. Yeah, I think who's taking notes? Like, is anyone, or can we like maybe get some folks to like help take notes?
Yeah, if anybody can jump into the doc and add things. So, but like maybe one of the key one key possible action is like helping to clarify governance, right?
Yeah, I think
Because that
maybe.
one is, yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say I think that's maybe what, because there's actually another slide answering this, you know, with more things. So I think maybe while we're on the slide, maybe we can pull action points and then we can put them in the doc before we move on. That's probably like. So I guess maybe do we see other action points here, everyone? And I see Claudio has his hand up. So Claudio, you want to just, you know, you don't have to specifically answer my question, but you can go with whatever you want to say.
I wasn't going to talk about this at all. I was going to add an extra commentary on what Wes was talking, if that is all right.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. I think there's always the issue, and there will always be the issue, which is unfortunate, of outsiders. When I refer to outsiders, I mean people that are not contributors at all, that never have a major contribution, that are just people in the internet that use Node.js user base. It's an impossible ask to have them understand the inner governance of the Node.js project. And a lot of the issues that happen, I would say, you know, incidents that we have, or misinformation, or having certain influencers becoming way more popular, or whatever you may say, is because of this fundamental misunderstanding. There's this non-explicit thing that core collaborators are more core, or like more fundamental to the Node.js project than non-core collaborators, but it's just a sad, unfortunate how the name of the team was done as core because they work on the core of Node.js. But the same issue being, what is the role of TSC? Because as far as I understand, and I have very little knowledge, there was also a community in the past which actually handled the non-technical stuff. So now we have the TSC being the overlords of the project that handle everything, but not necessarily being people that have any sort of experience with community leadership and etc. And it goes on. I think it's fundamental, in my opinion. It's very important for the project to prioritize that anyone is welcome and anyone has an equal say in any PR, in any future, in anything that is happening, and not this misunderstanding that, well, you're not a core collaborator, then your opinion doesn't matter. Because reality is we rely on a lot of external contributors on different projects that make a lot of impact and a lot of say and that direct and steward the direction of the project. So it is, in my opinion, something of the interest of the TSC that we should change how these things are done. But it is also a conflict of interest because for many, having the way how things are, unfortunately, creates this, let's say, segregation of layers inside a project, which for some is a comfortable spot, but it also, let's say, doesn't make it easier for the common user of Node.js to understand the workings of the project. So I think there's definitely room for improving things. But again, it's all about the people that are in charge to actually let that happen, right? That's my opinion. Yeah.
I'll let you know, Michael, you had your raised hand before me.
Right, yeah. I just want to say, like, I agree that, like, clarifying the governance will help, but I think, like, the arguing is like something we value almost as, and I think Wes was saying that, like, like, it's always been a principle being transparent. Unfortunately, that airs, the disagreements, but, like, somehow we got a message that is like, we're not infighting, we are doing things the way we think we should. We value, I think somebody commented on an issue, like, we value everybody's views, and so we're not shutting anybody down. We're not gonna, like, not have these discussions. So it's a feature, right? Like, when you see people arguing, it's not like there's controversy. It's not like we're about to break apart. We're just doing what we plan to do, right?
Yeah,
Sorry,
I would
that's
say
all I
that
would
this is
say.
probably like just to kind of like turn this into something actionable. Like I think for me, like we should put this as a point to maybe like there's opportunity here to do some advocacy towards the wider community around like the way we work. And we here is like I put that in quotes for we the project. Like I think there's I think there's tons of opportunity to actually share that and quite frankly, like it is healthy, but it's also, it can come off as toxic when you don't have that perspective. So I think like yeah, and also like sometimes it does get toxic, like to be quite frank, like in the sense that like people are like we're human beings with emotions and so but anywho, so I just if maybe whoever's taking notes, like maybe we can just capture that as an action item to kind of like have like educate the community around around like this specific kind of way of working. Like we could do podcasts, like conference talks, blog posts, and there's like lots of I think you like talk to the YouTubers, we could interview with their famous YouTubers about this, like there's lots of opportunities to put a mic on this, I think, and have a healthy discourse. So, but thank you all so much. Jean, you're moderating, so
yeah, I know. I'm moderating, and basically I was going to say what you just said, like in 5-10 last seconds, so that's fully okay. And I'm seeing Paula that you have your hand raised, so.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I don't really know. I'm peripheral. I claim that I'm a sideline cheerleader for Node. So one of the questions I had is there a way that the Node team creates their roadmap? 2024 roadmap, and it doesn't have to be a lot, but like what are the big things? And then, the discussion and the debate and the going back and forth happens within this roadmap that maybe everybody in the community feels that they have input to. That's one suggestion for how I've seen these kinds of things resolved.
So maybe I will just do a quick response for this one. In the past, let's say 2-3 years, and Michael will be able to jump on that if I'm saying some wrong stuff, is the Next 10 was used to gather community feedback and from user land and user base and everyone. And we do not provide like official guideline or roadmap or stuff like that, but mainly, oh, this is some feedback from 2,000 people that enter a survey, and 50 or 60% of them would be keen to have this new feature or this kind of new evolution or stuff like that. And it's just, we are just outputting that, and other people that want to work on specific area, like can do it on their own, have support, gather support and everything. And in the past 2-3 years, it led to a few working group being created, one of them being the performance one, also the single executable application, 2 of them. So there's no official roadmap. It's just, here's good topic that the community would love to address. And if some people want to pick them up, great. If not, bye, that's okay.
Yeah, since you asked, I'll jump in to say, like, we're not like a directly funded or corporately controlled project. So like, we don't have resources we can actually say, go do this. Therefore, a roadmap becomes really difficult, right? Because like a roadmap tries to set an expectation that like, hey, in this next release, this is going to happen. We don't have resources we can say, go do this, right? Like we have volunteers, people volunteering what they're interested in. So it's always been about, like for Next 10, it's like, let's try and identify what we think is important, what's interesting, what we think we should do, and capture that. Like we have our priorities document and like, here's what the feedback is we've had, but we can't commit to a roadmap based on that. We could just share that information and hope that our volunteers are interested in doing work in those areas. And that's sort of the approach on that front. So totally agree. I'd love to have a clearer, like, here is what we've decided as a project, but like, again, it comes back to our governance, and that like, I can't decide that. And there's in fact nobody who decides that on their own, right? It's more of a collection of people, each with their own thoughts of what's important, and we work together to, but there's no one necessarily unified, here's what we're doing and here's what we've got funding to do even. So Wes.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on that a little bit. I think this is actually another area of opportunity for our work collaborating with folks in the, who are doing this type of advocacy work, would be to go talk with them and share what Michael just said, right? Like that kind of thing, and say, hey, actually, this is just a show up kind of situation. If you show up, you get a vote. If you don't show up, you don't get a vote, and you just hear about it later, right? And so like making it clear that like nobody here, most people here first did not start this role because like working in this because they were ordained to do it. They didn't do it because their company paid them. They didn't do it because they had some special skill or knowledge or position at this point. Obviously, the folks way back in the early days did because they were the creators of the software. But now almost everybody who's involved in the project came on because they showed up, right? And so if we can figure out how to message that, like we talk about the roadmap, and the Next 10 group did put together a technical priorities doc, which is effectively a roadmap, even though it's not official, but it had all the items that were like the technical priorities of the project. It has a doc on the technical values, which came out of this group, which are like, we value user experience. And, being pretty general here, but it drills down into quite a few things. And the folks who were involved in that conversation were just the people who showed up. Anybody could have shown up and could have helped us form that, those things. And then what happened was Michael took that, opened a PR to the Node project's core repos. Again, core very loose here. I think that lives in the admin, or that might be in the TSC repo. I think it's in the TSC repo, and basically then raised it as an issue to the TSC and said, hey, here's what we're going to present. The Next 10 group put together this awesome set of guidance and principles. Here's what we want, you all to agree on. And they agreed, right? So it's not that like, you don't even need to be on the TSC to be forming the direction of Node, right? You just need to show up. And so to me, I think that's one thing where we could do a lot better with clear messaging, from the, especially working with the folks in the community who have these like large audiences, to really spread that message. Because I think people don't know that. I know I did not know that before I started doing open source. I did not realize that literally the only thing that makes you an open source contributor is showing up. The rest of it is entirely up to you, how you show up and what you want to participate in. But like, really, it's one thing, and that's showing up. And I think if we go to all these, YouTubers or whoever we want, blog authors, and go to Socket and say, hey, we want you to write your next thing on how to, be a part of the Node, future, show up to a Next 10 meeting is like the easiest thing. You can spend 1 hour every 2 weeks. And that's all you have to do, and you can help shape the future of Node. Like that to me would be, I think, a really powerful message for the project that's so simple for us to get across, right? Doesn't need big docs changes on the website or anything. It just needs like somebody from the project, very close to raising my hand here to be volunteering for that, but like somebody from the project to just say, hey, that's all it takes. Come help. So anyway.
So I know I might want you to talk to, and we have been on the same slide for something close to 30 minutes. So I think we can we have other topics. So
yeah, we have other topics. Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to say like plus 1,000, Wes, you said everything I wanted to say. I just wanted to share that like one of the goals that I have this year was kind of starting an enterprise user group for Node. And one of the goals of that would be to kind of figure out from an enterprise perspective, what are features both on the maintenance side, innovation side, that, performance security side, like that, large enterprises are like care about, and then working with them to find sponsorship on on those things, so, but anyways, just plus 1,000 to what Wes said, we can do a whole campaign on that. So are there any other action items that we want to take from here specifically? I think we've probably, I think for me, the conferencing visibility thing is, specifically, just kind of, having a hub around that data and having a gathering space seems to be like another theme here. And so
this one made me hard. Like there's already a few tools that try to reference and keep track of CFPN conferences. On the Node.js, or I guess even OpenJS Foundation part, keeping a list up to date or sharing something may be seen as, oh, we are advocating for one and not the other one. So I'm not sure, just on my part, that it would be a good idea. But maybe sharing, hey, if you want to speak at conferences, there is a tool that refer on that and keep that up to date. Here's the link of the 2, 3, 5 tools. Great. You can pick and choose.
yeah, I mean, I that sounds good. Maybe we just note that as an action, we can talk about it like either today or in a future discussion. I just wanted to capture that. So, but yeah, great points. Okay, next slide.
I think Paula had her hand up.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Just one more quick thing. I was on a mentoring call, it's open mentoring, and it was on the topic of how to get involved in open source and how that can benefit your career. So I want to put a plug in for making it easier for people to come in as a new person and learn, like the developer experience of how can I actually get involved. There are so few people who know that we have open meetings, and that all it takes, as Wes said, is to show up. So the developer experience might be a way to help that, but like you said, anybody can join and get involved. I'm happy to help spread that news. I'll also put a plug in for, do we want to participate in the Grace Hopper celebration again this year? So take that as a question for later. That's October this year.
Yeah, I think great points. I think the whole like just show up can be its own campaign. Like start like a pyramid scheme with that, you know. Just kidding. Just joking. All right, so moving on to the next slide. So again, same question. So here we have like a call out for having more official examples for large scale, kind of more complex, like getting away from the hello world to do app tutorials. And having official guidance from Node around, you know, scaling your architecture. That was kind of a call out from more than one response. Again, events promotion, like from like local area events promotion and support. You know, specifically like when people are organizing events locally within their communities, you know, how can the project like how can we help promote that a bit? There was also someone else was calling out for stickers. I don't know if that got caught in the summary, but like there was a need for like, hey, like, is there any swag? Like, can I get swag essentially for conferences and events that I'm organizing or attending? Let's see, establishment. Yeah, so essentially just a way for giving feedback and collecting feedback. Let's try to pick out ones that we haven't talked about. Marketing and branding guidelines. Yeah, so essentially like is there a hub for us to be able to create digital hub for people to get like, you know, the official logo and like all the like high-res images and, you know, essentially like a marketing guide. And someone referenced Vercel's marketing guide. They linked that in their response as like here's an example of a good one. So, you know, that seems like a low-hanging fruit that we could probably put together, but so maybe we want to capture that in the action item. A clear plan for runtime feature additions and kind of communication about design decisions. You know, I'm not sure personally like who that responsibility should fall on, but it was a theme in more than one response. The other thing was kind of these last three were amazing because one was kind of they're all kind of geared towards how do we get more non-technical contributions. So you know, participation from folks that are not just writing software, doing governance and community work. You know, how do we make space for roles that like tech writers, designers, bloggers, you know, and then lastly, like how do we leverage partnerships to kind of, you know, improve visibility, and usability, but I think more kind of leveraging partnerships to kind of accelerate the work that we're trying to enable on the project. So, so I think that's slide number 2, question number 1. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, just on a quick note on this one, like especially on this slide, I'm seeing a lot of part that is linked to building local community that will evolve to more national community and then international community, like going to conferences and stuff like that. And this is a discussion that or at least I had with some people in the call, Michael, Wes, and other people during a few summit or discussion or meeting that following the pandemics, a lot of local events around JavaScript, Node.js, or a lot of even other technology are almost dead or at least not as present as they were before, which impact also a lot of advocacy and visibility. Like before pandemic, you could see 2 events about JavaScript and Node.js if you are living in a city with more than, I don't know, 500,000 people in most country, which today is not really the case. Like you have a lot less meetup, you have a lot less people speaking at events, like local events and stuff like that. So it also impact maybe some promoting content, I guess, but also just being able to share and to meet other people part of the community. And this one is a good question. And I guess this is something that we could try to discuss during an extended meeting on how can we try to help local community bringing that. So not only Node.js, but like the JavaScript ecosystem with the OpenJS Foundation on how can we drive some effort to bring back local community.
Just want to note it's a big task, but yes. Any other any other kind of actionable takeaways from this? Like, how do folks feel about getting outreach, doing outreach or having more people involved on the on the governance and community front, right?
I think like anything that takes work, it really comes down to like who's volunteering to step up and do something. So it's if we have a champion who has a proposal for something they want to do and it fits into those things, then I think it's like, hey, let's help support them do that. Until we kind of have a champion, like it's good for us to say like, hey, we'd like some of this, but investing a ton of time figuring out at the first level is like, we'd like to do more in this area. Here's some thoughts. I guess just thinking out loud, it's a bit of a balance, right? Like there's no point us going and spending a huge amount of effort figuring out work to be done unless somebody's going to do the work. There is value identifying things we'd like people to jump in and help lead and push forward, right? So, but it's finding the right balance between those things. Because like you said, some things are a lot of work. And if we don't have volunteers today, then like it's good to maybe say we'd really like something in this area, but like spending a huge amount of effort figuring out that in detail isn't going to get us anything, right?
Yeah, I agree. It's like almost like a prioritization exercise for like all of these kind of action items, right? Like with a lens of like capacity and impact, being a driver. So
It's kind of like sorry.
Oh no, just I'm done.
I was gonna like at the end of this session, what would be nice is to have a few concrete actions that we say, these are things we would like to move forward. And then we can see like who's interested in getting involved in pushing them forward. I think certainly like we've already agreed the governance one is a really good one that would make sense. Like in terms of like access to opportunities for speaking and all that, like that could be a whole track on itself if somebody was interested in. The one I do find a bit interesting is like Marco mentioned in the chat was like, doing advocacy is quite work intensive. And it would be nice to be able to support that as a project, right? Like in some way. And I think like in some challenges we have is some of that advocacy sort of crosses the boundary between like advocating for Node in general as an open source project and work that goes on in somebody's company. Like, hey, I'm in a security side of things, so I'm advocating for Node and talking about security. Will the project repost, promote those kinds of things? I think that would be an interesting one for us to figure out as well. Like, what's our position? Is that something we can actually help support, or is it just no? That's too complicated. And Wes, got your hand up.
Went through some discussion with Express a while ago on a similar topic here, and it was some interesting stuff. So just to share sort of the things we had like a section on the website that had some stuff, and that's sort of what spurred the discussion. And it got old and was out of date. And there was maybe some mixed messaging, and then there's opinions too. So there's like a line between like advocacy for a release. That's one thing. That's really clear cut. Then there's things like, hey, here's how I set up my X. And some of those things are arguably not the best practice. So who decides, right? And so there's like this thing, as soon as you take it on, you're now expected to be the arbiter of some level of opinions. And so the risk is, and this is what happened with the Express page that I think is still probably there untouched because, that's just what happened, was like you end up in a rock and a hard place. You're trying to do the best you can, but you then are being expected to either retweet everything or have some level of quality control, which then injects your opinions as the person, maintaining it. And you may not understand all the context, or maybe in a certain scenario that is the best practice and you don't know it. And so like, it's kind of hard to do both sides of this, I think, well, unless you have a group that is like dedicated to it and really understands and has laid out a process for it. And that itself is work. So you then like take the work of doing the advocacy, and you have to then like do all the homework first, the pre-work, to even get to the point where you can effectively do it, which is difficult. I think it's great if we can get a group together who wants to do that, but we need to be sure that we like don't just say, oh, go start retweeting everything. Like we can't, make it a bot, because then we'd get a lot of abuse and probably a lot of bad messages. We would need to have a group of people who were understanding of the state of all the things and knew, oh, if there's questions here before we republish it or retweet it or whatever, we should go just fact check it, with somebody. Like there's like a bunch of those little things that would need to happen to do that well. And that's like the kind of stuff that a newsletter does, right? Newsletter people do that, but they're doing it from the spot of, this is my newsletter, it is my opinions, right? Whereas when you do it from the project, you have to think about it a little bit differently. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that, but like I don't think we want to maintain like a static set of page like links or stuff like that, right? Like that definitely becomes like long Algostea, whatever, very hard to manage. I think like trying to promote visibility of things, like we promote the visibility of things without sort of taking ownership of it, if you know what I mean, right? And I don't know, there's different models, and I don't know how you do that, but like in our current governments, we kind of like get to the point where like we end up trusting individuals, right? And so if we could come up with a model that says, once we've seen a certain track record, we trust individuals to a certain extent. And here are the guidelines, right? Like, it's kind of like you're allowed to talk about this. You're not supposed to talk, like if you're basically like, come to my company, that's over the line. But if you're talking about stuff that happens at your company that uses Node.js, that's okay, right? Like it's get agreement on that line, and then say like, once there's a track record, it's like, okay, we trust these advocates. We will retweet everything that they post because we trust that what they are, that we trust their judgment, rather than having to have like, as soon as we need another group that applies their judgment on what does and doesn't, I think that becomes unsustainable or very, very difficult, unless we have people who are like so engaged they want to do that. And so
Yeah.
can we come up with a model that doesn't require, it's kind of like automation. You want to automate things, because anything that requires people to make a decision, do things quickly is too much, right? Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, it looks like, is Darcy stuck?
I've tried promoting him a couple times, so you
I
have
also
to.
pinged him on Slack.
No, yeah. You just
He might
saying
just be AFK.
yeah.
Okay. Oh, he just pinged. Okay. Well, but anyway, so I just wanted to say, so listening to all this, like I've been kind of mulling on this ever since kind of reading some of these survey results, really. But have we ever kind of considered having like an experts program within Node? Because for me, like ultimately, like there's just just like reading through all the different feedback items, like there's a need for like more experts embedded like within the community, and recognized experts would be great. And then there's lots of different experts programs. Like I think having a very low touch program would be great, like nothing super crazy, but I think that could be a way of establishing this kind of like body of experts, and also just building kind of higher caliber, like kind of concentration of advocates, so I just was curious if that had ever been discussed on the project before.
I think there's been discussion like on the foundation side of like, a speakers bureau or different things, but I it's never like, if it's been there, it's never gotten to the point where we've seen it be super successful.
Okay, got it. Yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe we could like note that as an action item, like just to kind of look into kind of an experts program. I'm curious, like just to pulse gauge the room, and I would say Gleb, like you'd probably be like one of my first nominations on this experts program. So I'm just curious to hear from you, like I just to get a pulse, like would you think something like that would make sense for the Node project?
Absolutely, right? Like every company now has this program of ambassadors that they support, right? That creates content, makes presentations. Not necessarily they have to contribute or even do what the company tells them to do. I think the best programs are independent, but they act as someone who creates all this high quality content, right? And they are in position of authority because they're not paid, right? They're not core of a project kind of trying to promote it. Instead, they're experts. So I definitely think it's a good program.
Yeah, and what would be nice is if we could partner with the foundation to see if we could get like some, not a huge budget, but just some small travel fund, you know, even if it's like 30,000 annually, you know, for uh potentially supporting them, right? Like to speak, like it's essentially kind of a more focused speakers bureau. Like that could be the one of the perks for the program is, you know,
Right.
having travel funds, right, to do
I
community
think that kind of
engagement.
aligns with, what I was talking about in terms of like, can we get a model where we trust people to do the right thing? We set the
Right.
parameters and then we trust people to do the right thing. And then like, so that it's like, it's like these ambassadors, you can see like, yeah, you ask for us to retweet your link to your post, we will do that, right? Like, because we trust that you're going to be within these parameters, just like we trust our core collaborators to land things that they're comfortable maintaining, right? Like, and then we can build like other benefits on top of that. But like, that seems to me the first benefit is like, making it so that we can leverage, say, the Node.js account to promote stuff that more often, right? Because I think today, if we looked at what's retweeted or rebrand or reposted, I don't know how that gets selected necessarily, and like that there's probably somebody who has to know that something was published, and it's unclear like, does this cross the line or not? And so
Yep. Yeah, no, I agreed. I'm glad, Gleb, that you think it makes sense because you'd be like the target audience. So um that's a healthy endorsement. So all right, cool. So anything else? Sorry, I think I actually already moved on to question two, but like are we good on this question one?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so question two. So question two was, what are some of the most confusing, misunderstood or confusing concepts for Node.js users? And like, I cannot tell you how many repetitions there were here. There's very consistent themes. You can see that in the raw survey, streams, async, a lot of like just principles around asynchronous JavaScript, threads, the event loop promises. These are all like very common themes. The modules stuff came up quite a bit as well. And then there was another kind of in it, like there was the technical misconceptions, but then the other kind of layer of misconceptions was the governance, like how to know how does the project operate, right? We've kind of talked about that already. So a lot of people think, this is it's corporation driven potentially, or like they don't realize like, that this is like a volunteer led project that's a bit more like common infrastructure. And so, so this is kind of, I think so. Yeah. So those are kind of some of the themes. Any thoughts? You have your hand up, Jean. So I don't know. You're the moderator, so should I call on you?
No, that's okay. No, like for some of the topic, like event loop, promises, stream, like discussion between CGS and ESM, I think this is making sense as this is maybe not the most documented module for part of Node.js or more in-depth. So those one really make sense. To be honest, I'm quite surprised with the last which one? Two, and the fourth one from the bottom part. The perception of Node.js as outdated and the relevance when you compare that to .NET and Java. This one is quite interesting to me, the two.
Yeah, I think I can explain. Maybe this is like ChatGPT didn't do such a good job of summarizing this. So one was, I think the bias perception thing, I think, is more just that, like, hey, Node isn't the new kid on the block anymore. And you've got Deno and Bun, and like, essentially, like, there's a misconception from the community that Node is outdated, right? Like, and this is just coming from, quite frankly, like, this is my personal opinion, so I'm going to preface that. But like, the JavaScript community is kind of always in this perpetual state of infancy because there's always new people entering. And so there's just not fully always an understanding within the wider community that, like, like if like a new framework comes out that doesn't replace the old one, like, so it's not, there's like this like linear, it's not it's not a binary either or, and so this is just kind of like a wider problem in the JavaScript community. I don't know if it's something that like the Node project can address specifically, other than like, I think I think showing, like, I think it's important for people to understand why you would choose Node versus something else. I think that's maybe an area to kind of highlight for folks, just so they understand what the differences are, in terms of licensing or support or whatever. But other than that, like, I'm not sure. And then the Java thing, Java and .NET Core is more that, like, on the enterprise side, it's hard for companies to take Node seriously because it uses JavaScript, and .NET Core and Java have like more support for enterprise features, so that's why they get preferred in those settings. It seems like for some people it's like an uphill battle to get Node taken seriously within enterprise. So that was the consensus there.
Yeah, I'll add to that. It's kind of I find it a strange, like, it's a bit of a strange thing in that, like, I never try, at least internally where I'm working, to promote Node over other options in terms of saying, hey, you should stop using Java and you should start using Node, right? Like, where I'm always in the position I'm in, it's like, our customers are already using it, so we should support them in using. They've made their choice, right? Like, so I don't want to cast it as a battle between things, because when you look at the developer surveys, when you look at all of the things, people have made their choice, right? Like, JavaScript is used in a lot of places, and it always ranks like near the top of the survey. So I'm not sure it's like, hey, we want to battle the other runtimes. We just want to say it's used, and it's used extensively, so we need to do the right things to help the people who are already using.
Yeah, I think there's also, quite frankly, yes, and maybe marketing. I think there's just an opportunity here to market the features of Node, the reach of Node, the reasons why Node is great. There's just
absolutely, yeah, like saying, why would you use Node?
Right.
Totally a great, yeah, but not as a like, hey, and like, here's a comparison with something else, right? It's more like,
right.
What are all the strengths and benefits of using Node.js? And that I always use is like, yeah, you get great efficiency, you can get really good performance, you get the back end, front end. So like, having that in a very clear sort of marketing, why is Node a great choice? Yes, I was just more talking about the, hey, let's convince you from, you've got something else. Hey, we're going to convince you to switch. It's more of like, hey, it's a great choice. So like, understand the benefits. So agreed on that one.
Yeah, totally.
I think I'm next. So I actually have a small anecdote that will help, I think, a little bit on this. So I have a DM with a couple of folks on the OpenJS Slack, literally talking about this at our different companies. So we literally have like these big old posts. We each shared why and how we approach these types of decisions at our companies. And one of the people, and I don't want to, this is a DM, so I'm not going to share any names and stuff, but did bring up like an idea of like maybe doing a talk about this, because I think this would be really valuable. So for example, Netflix focuses very concretely on business needs. So we use Node because it serves our business needs. Our business needs are shipping UIs for various things. It just so happens, as we all know on this call, but like in the wider audience, they might not know, JavaScript is sort of required for that. And so it really lends itself well to the engineers we want to hire to build those UIs to then offer them a server and tooling setup with the same languages they're able to run, right? And the same runtime environments and all the same APIs and those things. So we think that it is a business need that we are fulfilling. We didn't choose Node or JavaScript because it was the fastest thing, right? We didn't choose it because it was XYZ technical reasons. We chose it because of these business needs that we need to fulfill. And so framing it like that really changes it. And there's two audiences there. One is the engineer who's got to make a new repo tomorrow for their work project, and they have nobody to tell them what to do, and they get to choose the wide world of programming languages and runtime environments. And then there's leaders. And leaders are the ones who we speak to when we talk about what are the business needs that we're trying to solve. So when you say like there's pushback in enterprise, the three people in this particular DM are all at fairly large enterprises with fairly different scopes. And we all have the exact same problems. How do you convince your Java, cohort at the company who's doing servers that it's actually all right that you're shipping a Node.js server, right? Like that question was like one that all three of us had been asked to sort of address at different levels of leadership. And I think having two different tracks of messaging is really important. And we have a lot of stuff on the technical front of, with when we talk about like, Bun and Deno of the world, that's like we're speaking to the ICs, we're talking to the engineers. But I think we also need to have that bigger picture thing that we hand as a landing page or a packet to the enterprises that has the what are the business needs that this particular software helps you solve, right? It is bridging the gap between UI engineering and delivery of large scale software. It's tooling for the UI space that also crosses the boundary into some of the server space. Like it's these things that I don't think we focused a lot on the IC messaging, and I don't think we have very much, at least from the project, on the, why should your organization, why should, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something like that's not a tech company. Like, why should your bank, choose Node.js? Because like banks actually are choosing Node.js, right?
Yeah.
They're not choosing it for their like processing of transactions, but they're choosing it for all these other reasons. And we don't really have great resources for that level of the conversation. So I think it would be great if we had folks who could invest in that.
Yep.
And
Go
I
ahead.
think Wes, you should be like the face of that campaign. I think
I can't volunteer for everything, sadly.
I just thought, yeah. No, I haven't been this, but yeah, no, I'm gonna put my hand in the queue. So after you, Jean. Yeah.
No, so it makes a lot of sense, and I think we also I agree 100% with you on. We focus on our message on IC people and a lot less in management. Like I remember 10 years ago, you had even paper magazine for why choose Java or C# or stuff like that. Or that's not going into big discussion there, but you had promotional way to say that one language is the best one, and not even speaking about best one, but just at least to advocate for people that are not IC. And I think we don't want to do that up to that level, but just being able to say, and someone posted in the chat a bit earlier an article somewhere, embracing Node.js, a game changer for top tech company, that was going through multiple tech company, including Netflix, including a lot of companies that we all know about, to say that it improves on performance, lower cost, ability to provide faster and stuff like that. We should be able to have some feedback from companies that use Node.js and allow them maybe to develop faster, like Wes say also to bring and to use one technology for your front end and back end and maybe even mobile application. So you don't need to have 3, 5, 10 different teams knowing different languages. But also one part is today, if you ask, I guess, and going back to the IC part, to most of the people what Node.js is good for, I guess one of the only or the most reason people or the most feedback you will have is to build APIs. Whereas in fact, you can build technically with Electron or stuff like that, you can build like desktop application, you can build mobile application, you can build CLI if you want to run that, you can go to and use even building infrastructure, scripting, pretty much everything. And it's not just API, REST API or GraphQL API. You can cover a full scope of everything where, and technically you can do the same with Java or C# on a lot of parts. It's the only thing is Java and C# advocated that, and I'm choosing them both because it's one of the biggest and it's the two that are cited here. I used globally for everything, but they spend years and years to say you can do everything in Java, you can do everything in C#. So, and technically you can do the same in JavaScript or using Node.js. So I think this is something that we could and should improve. Maybe also there is like building example, providing feedback with company, baking some specific article or example and say, oh, this is how we reduce that, or bringing core concept to people. For example, the good old is Node.js like single threaded and everything. Great. So most of the people do have this conception you can run only one thread. So they will be like, oh, so it's blocking, it won't work at scale and everything. Whereas in fact, using an event loop is one of the best way if you want to use and rely, like be able to handle requests or do something at scale.
Yeah.
Amal and then Michael.
Yeah, so well said, Jean. And like I think for just listening to you and Wes, like for me, what's clear here is just a need for kind of like, and this is why I mentioned to folks who are just joining, like one of the goals I have this year, hopefully God willing, is to start like a Node.js enterprise user group and kind of address some of this, right? Like ultimately, like we need to make the business case to enterprise on like why use Node, like what problems does like essentially this whole like why use Node, right? So I think from our earlier question 1, the kind of takeaway campaign is like just show up, right? And like it feels like the big takeaway here is like why use Node, and like I think there's like 100 bullet points that like that Jean and Wes just kind of like so lovely like articulated on that. So just wanted to say like yes and like plus a million.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to lower my end, Michael.
Yeah, okay. I think like, so maybe this is one of the concrete actions we should put is that like I know the foundation has worked on like, enterprise use of Node stories or whatever. I think, from our discussion, we don't think we're done on that front. So like that could be like a concrete ask is like, hey, we believe it's important to have more and more stories along the lines of what Wes just talked about. Like, I think it would be really valuable, for me, it's valuable to be able to say like, hey, go look at this company who's using it and they've talked about it. And here's another company. Like if we had unlimited resources, I'd love like a new article every month that says Node.js at Netflix, Node.js at Bank X, Node.js at Red Hat. Like, you could go through the list of companies who we know are doing things, and having that as a regular set of things you could refer to would be really good. So that's one, I think that like I would add as like an action we can say, let's talk with the foundation resources to say like one of our concrete asks is that they continue with that and maybe like work. Like, I don't know which the recent ones are, right? Like maybe there are some that we're not aware of. So maybe there's some coordination, like understanding and making sure that we all, anyway, like, so we can say like, here's clearly our progression of every month something comes out on that. And that's helping us move the needles. The other thing I just wanted, a random thought I want to add in is like, I recently learned that like .NET actually uses Node to build itself, I believe. And there's already kind of a symbiotic relationship in there that, like, a while back they realized that, like, say, the front end stuff is good to be done in Node. And so they, it's not in it comes back to, again, business needs, right? It's not an either or. It's like, for certain needs, you're going to use one, and for certain needs, you might use the other, or you might even use them both together. And like today, you can't really be using .NET Core without Node somehow being in there, right? And so it's sort of the end story that's good, right? And
That's a story we should highlight, though, right?
yeah,
I just interject another anecdote. This is just a great one that, Michael, your comment made me love here. When you build a Java project at Netflix, you use Go to execute Yeoman to initialize your JavaScript, or to initialize your Java project. So it is definitely not either or. It is absolutely choose the right tool for the job at the right time. Obviously, Yeoman maybe is a little bit old in the tooth, but this thing has existed for a bit. So like, when we talk about these things, so many people want it to be all this binary, everybody used to think of, Netflix as a Java shop for years and years and years. I still get people saying like, oh, I thought that, Netflix did Java. And it's like, yeah, but again, the Java team wrote their own project scaffolder in JavaScript because it was actually better for that job than Java. And it's using a Go CLI to execute it. So JavaScript beat out both Go and Java for the job of running a CLI tool to scaffold a project. That's where JavaScript fits, right? And that's the kind of thing where I think people need to be a lot more nuanced when they're having those discussions about what are we choosing the technology for, because every company has all the needs from running a production server to scaffolding their little new, project. So
Yeah, I mean, it's like the Node is everywhere campaign, and it's like, yes. Do we have anyone? So I think I just wanted to point out, like, Stefan had a Stephen. Oh my God, Stefan, like, which one is it? Like, I haven't seen you in like 3 months, and I'm already forgetting. He's not coming off mute. Okay. Did anyone know if it's Stefan?
Yeah, it's him.
Stephen.
It's Steven. Okay, there we go. Oh, it's Stefan. Thanks. No, that doesn't help. No, Stefan had a really good point in the chat I just wanted to highlight, which is kind of a different angle of this, which is more like explaining to enterprises why to contribute to Node. And like for me, like again, that's like, these case studies, talking to businesses around like why they should be investing in and contributing to Node. Like those are all things that I think would be really best served, like, from an enterprise user group. But that's the other thing is it's not just like why you should be using Node, but like also why to contribute, right? So I think that was what Steven said. So cool. All right, let me just move on to page 2 or of this. So let's see. So the kind of themes here are, still like lots of things with modules, and some of the fragmentation in the ecosystem around modules has come up quite a bit. Obviously, just same thing with the multi-threading, async, that whole area of Node is still confusing for folks. And then some performance issues keep kind of coming up, and like there's a lot of like confusion around, well, like, JavaScript is slow and like shouldn't be using JavaScript for certain things, and like, it's while that can be true in some cases, it's like it's not universal, right? So like ultimately, like how to best make the case for the strengths, I think, of the project, and like what are good opportunities for you to pull it into your stack. And then of course, like the last one being Node.js is open source, and so there's no obligations from the maintainers to the community. Like the fact that like most people think that like, oh, their Node is following some strict roadmap or some strict release schedule, some like essentially like that. No, the project owes the community something, right? Like that's kind of the theme there. But yeah.
Yep, you're done.
Yeah.
Awesome. On this point, I think I've seen Matteo, Kalina, talk a lot about performance and how like JavaScript is actually faster than some things, and people just have this misconception that JavaScript's slow. And I just think that like he's probably one of the only people who is saying that, or like making content around that. And that said, he's also talking about like, you know, very strictly HTTP networking operations, which arguably, like, yes, in some cases JavaScript can be faster, like Indici or something from Platformatic, his company. But then there's other cases where like there's a reason why people build proxies in Go, or you know they use an off the shelf, like, you know, probably native C based you know, options. And that's where like, yeah, JavaScript is not going to beat Go or Rust or whatever else at like, you know, other forms of HTTP networking, like, you know, something that involves TLS or yada yada. I think another big thing is recently our competitors, if you'd call it that, like Bun and Deno, like to throw benchmarks around that may not be the most accurate. I would like, you know, I'll directly call out both of those projects for posting benchmarks usually on one platform. They will generally pick the fastest platform, the fastest implementation, and then say like, hi, we are X runtime, and we are 10, 15, 50, 100% faster than Node.js. And it's like, well, one, is your API compatible with Node.js? Two, do you support all the different platforms that Node.js does? And like, it's beyond just Windows, Mac, and Linux. If you look at Node CI, we support a whole ton of OSs that these other runtimes do not. And then beyond that, it's okay, do you actually support callback patterns? Do you support API methods that have been deprecated for years? You know, do you break the web is the, you know, the golden question. And I think a part of it is like Twitter is going to Twitter. These companies are going to sandbag and market however they want to. There's nothing we can do about that. And we also may not necessarily have much of a ground to stand on, because punching back is not going to ever look good as the big guy on campus. Node has been around for a lot longer. So just a couple more perspectives and data points to consider when we talk about our confusing concepts, or, you know, our performance concepts.
No, yeah, totally agree with you. And just I wanted to go back to the last point that is also echoing what we said on the first question about, I think maybe some people didn't read or are not aware of the governance of the project. But which this last one is quite strange to me. Like, I don't really think there is a lot of runtime or languages that are 100% like where maintainers own something to the community. Like, I'm thinking to C, C#, PHP, everything is mostly open source, and there's no expectation from maintainer on some specific part. So is it something we need to improve? I'm not sure, but yeah.
I just wanted to add, like, we've only got 10 minutes. No, sorry, 40 minutes. Never mind.
Oh yeah, 40.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah. So Jean, I'd love to go back to your point. I just want to go back to, but just before that, can I put my hand up in the queue? I think I'm next, maybe, for Ethan. So Ethan, like, thank you so much for that, kind of input. You know, when, you know, I think when I have on a podcast called JS Party, and when the kind of hoopla, when Bun first dropped and like was making all these bold claims, right? Like, as it being a drop-in replacement, like I kind of just wanted to set a few things straight for the community. And we had a really insightful conversation with Matteo and James Snell, who kind of really echoed a lot of the points that you just shared. Specifically, like, it's just it's not apples to apples, right? Like, it's very tough to compare these runtimes. And so, you know, I think it's hard for not, I mean, like, it's not classy for the project to like come out with like this comparison list, right? But ultimately, I think people that are like, if folks, like, for example, like if folks on their own personal blog post platforms like want to kind of help set the record straight, like I think that would be great, right? I think like people who are maybe users of the project or just general wider community members being able to kind of actually like, okay, maybe I should phrase this a different way. Like who's like who should set the record straight? Like I want to hear from you all on things like that, because ultimately like there's an opportunity here to like educate the community, right? And you know, it's very hard to kind of work against like marketing engines from startups that are well funded and have like really strong incentives to kind of like, you know, and then they have the momentum of like being the new kid on the block, right? Like, and new and shiny always trumps everything in JavaScript. So, so yeah.
I think
I wanted to reply, but if Wes beat my hand up,
go for it. Go for it.
Okay, I was gonna say quickly, to like Amal, some of your points. I think with marketing in particular, we're also not a company. First, Node.js isn't selling anything. Bun is, Deno is. They're selling hosting. They're selling, serverless functions. I guess soon Deno is going to be selling a package registry. And so I guess our marketing is not necessarily like the same caliber. What I think would be really cool is if we could, we don't need marketing, but we need a very strong description. And I guess we do need marketing. We need a very strong like brand awareness or like project goals or project description that states why Node is the way it is. Like we should talk about how many different platforms or operating systems Node.js supports, and we should list them like prominently. We should talk about the legacy, like Node.js supports, a decade plus of applications, and we take backwards compatibility extremely seriously. We could even point to examples of like when we deprecate a feature, we actually continue to include it in the runtime forever or for years beyond when we deprecate it, so that old projects can continue to work even potentially on new versions. And so I think it's like I think it would be really important for us to maybe change some of that communication, and we don't necessarily need a marketing department to do so.
Yeah.
I think it lowered my hand. But
Yeah,
I'm gonna just say a slightly contrary possibility here. I actually don't know if we need any of that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to say like people shouldn't do that. I think everything Ethan said is 100% correct. But I've said this on Twitter and I will say it again here. When they're selling something, they have to actually get you to go from the free thing that Node project the Node project is offering, and their thing has to be so much better than the free thing that businesses, because we don't really care about the hobbyist project here, right? We're talking very large enterprises down to startups scrambling to survive on a shoestring budget would choose it over what we have. And frankly, that's a real tough thing to hit, right? Like if I were a VC, I would not be putting my money there like these VCs have personally. And I think they're doing excellent engineering work, but the Node project just needs to watch what they do and take some of it that is good and do it in a way that's still backwards compatible. And the Node project wins here without even trying, right? Because it's a free and open source software. We've proven this in the industry for years and years and years and years, right? There are value adds. So if we look at other ecosystems, there's value adds that people pay for, but they're almost never rebuilding the runtime to do that, right? Again, if we look at like the Java ecosystem, there are companies backing the specific Java runtimes, but the actual work on it is all done, not the same quite, but pretty much open source. And there's a reason for that. So the value that these companies get and that companies pay for to them as SaaS products and stuff is always on top, right? So I don't think the Node project actually has to do anything here. We win by default by being the free and open source thing, because everybody can just come and contribute and help drive the roadmap by just sending an engineer off from the team and saying, go attend Node's meetings and help make sure it stays what we need, right? And so like arguably, when we're talking about this, like that hype, we as the Node project probably should lean into that hype and say, yeah, great job, team. We don't need to change anything we're doing here. We're just going to keep on doing what we're doing because we're doing really great at it. And so it's not like there's no bad look there, because we're not. This is great. They're doing excellent engineering work. They are getting they got a lot of funding to do some really awesome engineering work. And the Node project should just say, this is awesome. We love you. We would love to work with you in whatever way possible, because it improves everything for all of our users, right? Whether or not, you know, people are going to shout about Node on Twitter about, you know, Node is copying Bun or Deno, like, frankly, doesn't really matter, because in the end of the day, what we care about is serving our users. And our users are mostly at companies trying to ship products, and we're making that happen for them. Flat out. That's it, right? That is the thing that we're doing really well. And so like we can market all we want with this stuff. I think that's good. I'm not trying to say don't do that, but we definitely shouldn't frame it as like we need a marketing that competes or anything like that, because this is the joy of open source right here, is that open source wins de facto because of the structure of it. So I just think, just to challenge the like narrative there on like we're going up against the marketing of a well-funded startup, like they can have fun. Great. I mean, I love their marketing. I actually think it's really fun to watch. And we should just like not sweat it too much.
Yeah, I just wanted to similar thoughts to what Wes just shared. Like we definitely, I don't think we should be marketing as a comparison or as a competition, because even forgetting the fact, like whether you win, like it adds credibility where it may not even be there, because like I'm in the same camp as Wes, right? Like it's not really a competition, because the bar is so high. I do find it frustrating, like was mentioned, when like things we don't think are fair or true or accurate are out there, but like sometimes doing nothing is still the right thing, because debating it really doesn't matter. I do think, and again, aligned with what Wes said, is we should still promote what's good about the project, and like, you know, the fact that it's open source, that we've been shipping releases on a reliable schedule for a long time, and like, because to me, the choice is like obvious, right? Like if you're going to do something in a business where risk matters to you, there's got to be like a really big win to pick the thing which isn't Node, because Node is more, you know, it's open source, there's more people involved, you're not depending on a single company, and on something that just doesn't have the same level of usage. So I think we should be like, maybe, you know, it doesn't, and maybe it comes back to what Wes said, like for the individual, you know, people who want to play around at home, the newest, latest, greatest is the funnest thing to play with potentially, but that's not what you should be using in your business. But you know, it's where do we want to market, or not where do we want to market, but where does it matter to us, right? And maybe it's like, yeah, people who want to take the latest, greatest thing that you wouldn't want to put in production, sure, right? But that's not something we should fight to win or anything anyway. So yeah, okay, that's all I had.
Great. Yeah, great points from both of you. I think it's a good perspective that I like, you know, I guess I'll say like I partially agree with. Like as I said, I don't think we need to like counter market, but I think we probably need to do a little bit better at like describing Node either on the website or in OpenJS Foundation. What stands out to me is like we always talk about funding. I think one of the major reasons why Node, or in general OpenJS Foundation, struggles to get funding is because it's not a very easy sell. There are, you know, a lot of companies might not actually know what really goes into Node in behind the scenes, or like what, you know, just how big of a thing Node is. I'm not, you know, all of us on this call are so well involved. We know how big it is, but even when we tweet about it, you know, half the replies have no clue, and they're no developers themselves, or have been for years. And that goes to like the people who make decisions about sponsorship and such. Those are business people. They know close to nothing probably about the scope of Node.js in comparison to a VC funded, marketing pumped Bun and Deno and whoever else. So I think the big deal is like if we do maybe a better job at some of our marketing and explanations, that could lead to some better funding opportunities for companies that business people are making the decisions and not fellow Node collaborators. I do think Amal had her hand up before all of us.
Yeah. It's Amal first. Yeah.
Yeah, so just wanted to, so Ethan, I was kind of in your camp 100%. So and I agree with everything that was said by everyone. I think for me, the importance of marketing here, right? Like ultimately, like there's no technical need in the sense that like for anyone that's looking at this subjectively, that's trying to make a business case, it's very clear. However, the problem with not marketing is that, there's just so much misinformation and just a lot of FOMO driven decisioning that happens within tech leadership. I think just having clear messaging around like the scope, size of the project, the way it works, what the advantages are, like ultimately like having that messaging and marketing and being very clear about it, like helps kind of just dispel some of that misinformation, right? Like, because ultimately, like for me, the problem is more just on the misinformation side and like the lack of being informed, right? And then you have people that are very confidently incorrect, or blissfully ignorant and like spreading ignorance. And so for me, it's like, how do we, I just want to have a vehicle in a way to kind of like just kind of nip that in the butt, right? Like I think everyone should understand how these projects are different, and why, comparisons aren't even necessarily fair, right? Like one way or the other. So yeah.
Yeah, just on a quick note, we have 27 minutes left. So I think for this point, the last two questions or part will be for Matteo and Michael, and then we can move for the third question.
Yeah.
Matteo, up to you.
So sorry, I just couldn't meet. I was planning for everybody. I was planning to be here from the beginning, and things went off the rails big time. So I couldn't join. So there is that I wanted to say something about the type of funding on and what are the goals and so on and so forth. And so there are two bits. The first one is funding the foundation. Okay, identifying funding for the foundation is not our responsibilities. Okay, it's the responsibilities of Robin and their team. Okay, so to be honest, I don't think that we should be focusing on that problem. Okay, it's not our problem to solve. Okay, and it's not something that this group should focus on. Okay, I think this is one thing. Okay, the other bit is making sure that companies invest developers in Node.js. Okay, put developer time and developer contributes to Node. Okay, and developer keep trusting Node. So two things. One is the trust, building the trust on the developers, and the other one is building the trust by the companies. Okay, so these two bits, okay, are what we should be focusing on. One is related to funding, okay, in the sense of we want funding because we need more developers, companies to invest more developers, or ways to pay developers, okay. But again, we do not have a crowdfunding account, to be honest. That's technically not exactly true, but it's not publicized. Okay, so if we wanted to receive money, if we want to be fundraising ourselves, then we could. Okay, potentially we could. Other open source projects in the foundation do that. The collaborators of other open source projects in the foundation do that. Okay, but this is a question mark on a lot of things. Okay, so it's a big shift. Okay. Truth to be told, we need money and we need people working full time on this project. So this is not out of scope. Okay. But to be honest, money, I don't think it's something that we should be worried about. Okay. And we should focus more on developers and companies, but more on the adoption and so on and so forth.
Yeah, Matei, I just want to make sure just so you clarify, like, I think you maybe probably joined the conversation when we were talking about the fact that there's competition from funded companies, but really like the focus wasn't too much on.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I just heard the mention about the, I entered and there was a big mention from, there was this, Ethan just said along, about funding, and this was one of the things that I had to say in this call. So I found it the right spot and just said, I probably entered at the right moment to say it. Okay. We should focus on the devs and not on the funds. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I was just the last, like, I wanted to just from the previous discussion, sort of like, if the takeaway again from what like Ethan was saying and some of the discussion for me is like, I don't think we're all sort of seems like we're in consensus. We shouldn't be getting into like a technical comparison fight, but by explaining better, and we've already said like we should have a goal to like better explain the governance. So that's, I think, still one of our actions is like, by better explaining the way the project works, the values of the project, and that, it's open source, like we will achieve some of the messaging that we think will help in these particular cases, and which is aligned with, what makes sense as an open source project.
Mhm.
So hopefully that, that thing that we've already identified as a concrete action can help in sort of what we would like to achieve. To Mateo's comment, like it was still like, how do we, in advocacy for the project, there is an element of like, how do we bring support, people, time, maybe dollars to the project itself? Because like we can either say, hey, that's perfectly fine, but if it's not, then advocacy is probably one part of that, is like, how do you convince companies who generally don't spend money on anything they don't have to spend money, whether it's by letting their people spend time, donating it directly or whatever to support the project? Like that's hard to divorce a little bit from overall, what you'd want to achieve through advocacy, right?
Yeah, I think this is, for me, this is like the enterprise user group kind of action item, in the sense that like, I think we have, once you figure out what percentage of your revenue is dependent on or intersects with, node infrastructure, it's easier to make that case, right? But you have to give people, developers internally and leaders internally, the tools to make that case. But yeah, it's a great point. So should we move on to question 3? All right, cool. Okay, so question 3. This one's was a big one. 2 very dense pages. So essentially the question was, what challenges do you face in your role as a community advocate for Node? And there's lots of themes here, from things that we've already discussed, but there's the whole like Node not being the new kid on the block and needing to kind of refresh its brand. Like I think some of those things can be addressed by some of the things that we've already identified as areas to kind of share more information, set the record straight, kind of talk about the size and scope of the project, how it works. There's kind of just a recurring theme from folks around like not having enough support at work to kind of be contributing to the project, right? So like ultimately, like, what can we do to better support that? Helping people explain why, maybe they should let their employees work on Node for 10 hours a week or whatever. So folks are, obviously lots of confusion around asynchronous programming and people needing some more formal resources around that. One of the challenges that was also cited was there's a lot of diversity of opinions on how things should be done within the project. And so, that can sometimes be limiting and challenging for folks that are trying to learn, right? So like whose opinion do you follow, like which school of thought do you fall under. Time again was another limitation. Not having a ton of conferences anymore, and finding difficulty, like having trouble connecting with folks in real life. Let's see what else that we haven't covered. Yeah, so I guess somebody cited that, like, there's a lot of there's like essentially like there's just a lot of information, there's information overload. So like how do you how do you funnel the noise from like things that are valuable? Another kind of thing that came up in more than one response was like, visibility and recognition of advocacy efforts, right? So like how do you like recognize people for doing great community work? And then, difficulty kind of trying to make the case for Node within companies, specifically like how do you make that revenue generation kind of connection? And then the other like big one, I think, which is the last one, right? Like it seems like it's like limited acceptance of community advocates unless they contribute code as core members. And so like there's a suggestion here for an ambassador program, right? Which we kind of talked about earlier. So yeah. Thoughts. So, seems like we've covered a lot of, so the good thing is like a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about, like we've really hit on many of the, like I think they would be items that would cover a lot of the points that were brought up here. Oh, are you just muted or?
Sorry, yeah, having had all of the other discussion, nothing here jumps out to me as like, yeah, let's sort of, I think echoing what you said, that we've probably covered most of this.
We've covered, which is good, right? Like we've done our job to some degree. Like if we're like, nothing here is like a huge surprise. Sorry, Matteo, like we had some pretty good action items, so maybe we can spend some more time on that. All right, anything else from anyone else? I can move on to the second page. Okay, so second page, very kind of similar themes here. Just we talked about this earlier as well, like, a need for kind of partnership, for more partnership opportunities with the Node project. Like not as many conferences heavily focused on Node. Someone had a really great point that like the summary didn't capture, which was just that like there was kind of a rant about the fact that like there was a dedicated Node project within the foundation, and then that got merged into another conference, and like then now it's like then it became a track in a bigger conference, and now it's like an afterthought. Like basically like the official Node conferences that were foundation led and sponsored, they just kind of have been like it's just been dwindling in support. And I've had conversations with Robin personally about that, so I understand. I think there's there's some financial reasons why like the math just didn't add up for them, but I think like I don't think that's a good enough excuse. So anyways, so just it like social media was another kind of big trend here, like where essentially like the feedback here was that some people have like a really loud microphone online, and like not all opinions get equally they don't have the same weight, and so some voices get buried and some opinions get overshadowed, based on that. And so ultimately like the feed like generally it was like sometimes like the way certain people use their social media accounts is not necessarily like it can sway the vote. And so yeah, so I'll just give you guys a minute to like read the rest of these through. Yeah, and just so you know, like that middle section, maybe not the clearest here, but like it's the feedback was that there's a lot of moving pieces with Node. There's a need for it's a very dynamic project. There's a need for more contributors, and like, you know, how do we get more people involved in the project, right? And like have a sense of urgency around that. So yeah. Matteo, do you want to just go ahead?
So yeah, there are two things that like there is a big thing about the lack of recognition. Okay, I think this is a big apart from, you know, folks that are in the TSC or are in very specific roles, it's very hard to get any to get the recognition you deserve as if you do community outreach. Okay, and yeah, this is. But this is not rocket science. Like, there are ways in which we can practice. So it's, you know, it's literally and the other side of this topic, okay? There's two sides of this lack of recognition, okay? And one is we also need blessed people, okay? People that we know don't tell bullshit. Sorry for the terms. But in my half of the articles out there, half of the content that is being said and told about Node is more or less outdated, incomplete, or just wrong. And if we don't have blessed people that can, you know, knighthood of Node.js, I'm joking, okay? The captains are gone, you know, it's, you know, I don't want to use the term Illuminati, you know, there is a lot of things that they're already gone, okay, the terms, but we need to, like, people that knows how to talk about, and another bit, if the big, you know, if a big change was done by somebody, okay, very often the people that report about those changes, that present about those changes at conference, don't list the people that have done those contributions. Now, this is to some extent it's a little bit of a problem, okay? Because I have personally seen a lot of my features and work and talks that I've done for Node streams, same material, more or less take and reused by others, okay? Without any link back, okay? So, why bother? No, sorry to be,
I think that's like earlier we talked about an ambassador program. So I think what you're chatting about is in that, like, the idea is that there'd be people who would become ambassadors. And like, from my perspective is we want to get to the similar model we have for collaborators. Like, we find the people we trust.
Yeah.
We don't review all of their, like, I guess we do PR reviews, but like, we can't have a committee that reviews everything that gets retweeted or whatever. But like, we find the people that we trust. We set some parameters down. So like in your specific case here, one of the parameters to be, we expect that when you talk about things, you give proper attribution to the people doing the work in the project. You know, and it's okay to talk about what you're doing at your company as long as you're not, you know, crossing this particular line. And we set the parameters, and then we find people, we trust them to work within those parameters. If they don't work within those parameters, then, you know, potentially you get dropped as an ambassador. And like, hopefully that we then build a feedback loop that says, like, here's the parameters we'd like content to be built with. And then we do our best. And like, you know, my ask would be like, can we get the Node account who has lots of followers to retweet anything that they, like, if they've written an article and asked it be retweeted, we just do that automatically. And we trust them until, like, if we, you know, people see some ones and say, wait a second, I don't think that article followed the parameters. Eventually we might say, well, okay, sorry, you're no longer ambassador. Maybe they need to be reconfirmed every year to make it easier. But so I just wanted, since you missed the earlier conversation, just say we did, I think that was one of the things we were going to put as an action item, and to cover what you're just talking about.
Yeah, Michael, I would say yes, and but Matteo had one other point that I don't think quite fell into the ambassadorship. Like, I think the ambassadors, like, or the experts program would be recognizing experts and giving them kind of a formal stamp of approval. But Matteo talked about recognition specifically as well, right? In addition to that, like, and I think the recognition thing is like, yeah, that some of it can be through these kind of cultural guidelines. These kind of we have to change the culture. We have to set the culture of like having a culture of gratitude, like, so that starts with us. Actually, it starts with the existing people on the project, but like having maybe a more formal thing like awards, like maybe the project has like like awards every year that it gives out, to whether it's new contributors or badges or whatever. But like like, is there something that we can do that's like a token, right? It's like that like that would be for people like that are doing different things in the community and helping kind of push the project forward, right? And maybe that's something that is co-managed with the ambassador like experts program, but ultimately, like, I do think those are separate things,
Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said. I was just thinking, like, in the context of what we're talking about today in terms of advocacy, one of the things we can do is explicitly put into the parameters that we would, like, the expectations that we set for when you're doing advocacy. If you're talking about the things and you base all of your work off of a presentation material put together, we expect, like, that's a good thing because he can't be everywhere, but we expect that there be recognition of the work that was put in there and promotion of his contribution as part of that. So, like, totally, like, that's what I was just trying to say. Like, the parameters can help on that side. I do totally agree that we want more promotion just of people who work in the project. I'd love to see much more, like, even our Twitter account, like, hey, this person in the community just did this and this person did that. And, like, I think right now the sense is like, but the people we'd be promoting to don't care about that. That doesn't align with my views, but I think, like, some program that figures out how we use what we have, which is basically to recognize and to publicly acknowledge the contribution people make in as loud a way as we can. I also think, like, the awards and all these other things can be good as well, but, like, it's just we should be, a program that would be doing that overall would be good.
Yeah, or even just community profiles, right? Like something just to highlight like people on on the website, or
We had talked about that, actually, and I talked. Kylie had, one of the past collaborator summits, we said, hey, let's do that, and I did follow up a few months ago. So that's maybe something that they were all, Foundation was already thinking about, and we might pull on that spring. Or if we have volunteers to write and, do more, we can always, if we have a champion to do something, absolutely, that would be a great thing to move forward.
Great.
Yep. So just on a quick note, we have like 5 minutes left.
Oh, wow. Man, where did time go?
Time fly.
Can we, in that time, put together, like, what, I think there's been a few, like, what would be concrete next things that we want to push forward? I see somebody's already written some stuff under the bottom section, so that's good.
I just wanted to comment. I feel like there's a lot that came out of this. So I'm wondering if, since we only have 4 minutes, if we should just try to, like, open up a bunch of issues in next 10 to track, and then we could follow up on the normal next 10 meetings for them. Because, like, if we want to do an ambassador program, that's like a big, right? Like, that's a big effort. I mean, I think it's great.
Yeah.
But, like, every single one of the, like, big deliverables, I think, is at least enough that we should just probably open up issues and do the normal.
Yeah, like, it may be our actions are just to open up issues for, like, the ambassador program is the one I remember. I remember, like, getting the message out on governance, like the Node governance, and what that means to the project. I have a feeling there was another, but those are the two that I remember, right? That we could open an issue for and say like,
Yeah, marketing the size and scope of the like what it like the breadth of Node, right? Like kind of like having some more community awareness of like the breadth of Node and what is Node and what platforms it supports and how it's, yeah, it's hard. Like I don't think it's a great thing for the project to put out an official statement about how it compares to other runtimes, but like I think having the baseline information allows other people in the community to then take that and draw whatever conclusions, but I think that was one. The other thing that was just like a lot of kind of official data, like official guides, more official guides on different kind of topics that people are confused about when it comes to kind of some of the async workflows. And like I don't know, Matteo, like I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but like it came up in the slide right before you joined where people, are confused about the event loop and just promises, streams.
How can you not be confused if most of the content is wrong?
Right.
So it's a hard topic, and if the person explaining the topic is not super competent in it, it will make a huge mess. They will make a huge mess.
Right.
And I remember when we documented it in the beginning, it took us, I don't know, maybe 6 months to write the piece of doc that documents how the event loop work. And it's I don't know, I remember that we scanned so many, like a lot of people had to dig into libuv internals to understand certain things and so on and so forth, because it was very hard to explain it. Okay. So, and then it changes because it changes over time. So how can you, like, I am, like, the point is that we very recently I saw an article published not so long ago that says Node.js it's do not have threads. Like I'm still reading that stuff.
Yeah. I don't know if there's like a myth busting, like there needs to be like a myth busting.
Okay, sorry. This is I have like this is how can you resolve that? I have, it's you need to push out, like a friend of mine created this it's called the Brandolini's law. My friend is Brandolini, and it has he said that the amount of energy required to refute bullshit is an order of magnitude that the energy needed to produce it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
What are
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think that maybe the question is just like, how do we prioritize? Which efforts can we prioritize? And I think it's like based on like what we think are, is most feasible given the current capacity. Obviously the big elephant in the room is, how do we get more people, to show up at these things, right? More people engaged overall in the community. So it's chicken egg. So.
I think a little of it is value, right? Like, the more value we can provide for getting involved, the more people will get involved, right? And that's where, like, things like the ambassador program is like, if you do a good job, if you can be recognized for that, and we can reinforce that, then we'll probably see more people doing that. Whereas if it seems like you're just doing it on your own and nobody really notices, that is harder as an individual.
Right.
I know we're near the end, so I'll stop talking.
We are at the end. We are even 1 minute above. So that was great. Do you want like last word, Amal?
I want to just say thank you to everyone. Oh my God, we had people dropping in and out, coming in with some great feedback. Just thank you so much, like everyone, seriously. And obviously thank you to all the people that contributed to the survey and gave so much thoughtful input and feedback. I put a link to the slides, and on the last slide, there's a link to the raw survey results. I asked just not to share the raw survey results for another like maybe weekish on the wide internet, because the survey's still open and people are contributing. But feel free to take a look and read through everything. That was very insightful that people shared. They're very honest. So yeah, that's
I think
and I
we'll-
hope, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go
Finn and Ethan and Wes. Well, Wes, you're kind of already in, but Arangel and Stephen, like I would encourage you, and Mateo. I mean, Mateo, you're like the world's busiest person, but would encourage you guys to like join the Next 10 working group. We meet bi-weekly, every other Wednesday. So, would love your input.
Yeah. And also I think we'll like in a week or 10 days when the survey is over, we will publish everything part of the Next 10 to keep tracks and record on everything. And
Yes.
also the full meeting note, feedback, and I think we'll be opening PRs or at least issue on the action that we discuss and maybe some more link to that.
Totally.
Cool.
This was very productive. So thank you all.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
See you.